Okej. Dzień dobry, witam
All
Państwa.
right, good morning. Hello to everyone. Welcome to our meeting. The title of our meeting is Effective and Well-Functioning EWCs in the Post-Pandemic Era.
Dotyczącego efektywnego i dobrze funkcjonujących EWZ-ów w okresie
Today we are starting workshops. I'm here on behalf of the Public Affairs Institute. We are a partner to this project. At this point, our role is to create, with other partners and with the leader, an effective tool to assess the work of EWCs. So far, in this project, we have conducted some national research. We received information from Poland, Spain, Portugal, Slovakia. We have also conducted a training session in Warsaw. I was an attendee of that meeting together with Maciek, my colleague from the Public Affairs Institute. And this is our online meeting, and it gives us an opportunity to discuss things about EWCs, understand them more. As you all know, the situation is quite dynamic right now. The European Parliament has initiated a process of amending the EWC directive, and the European Commission started the first and the second process of consultations with European social partners. So we are in the middle of legislative changes that can potentially be made to the EWC directive. But we are going to talk more about that, and I would like to hand over to the project leader right now, and he will greet you and open the meeting officially. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me well? I would like to welcome Barbara Sordykowska. She's our expert, and it's also her name day today because we celebrate name days in Poland. So her name is Barbara, and it's the day of all Barbara. So all the best to you. And also, Barbara is the patron saint of all miners. So this is a very apt celebration today. So, to the point. Welcome, everyone. This is our online meeting. Last meeting took place in October on the 11th and 12th, and we were in Warsaw at the headquarters of our colleagues. These meetings were very productive. We received a lot of information about EWCs, about their functioning, about their roles, about their tasks. And also, Barbara indicated that there will be some changes and amendments to the directive on EWCs. So we are in for some changes to our processes. The trade unions need to be up to date with all the information. We are hoping for the amendments to be positive to us, and we want them to be fully implemented in the member states of the European Union. EWCs are an important tool for social dialogue. This is a forum for us to exchange information, share observations on our operation. But also, we can get updates from the company, from the management about their plans, about their upcoming projects, or about some unwanted occurrences such as close downs. So this is all I wanted to say at the beginning of our meeting. The meeting will take 4 hours. I hope for our discussions to be very fruitful and productive. I hope for us to exchange opinions and experiences. And over to Barbara now. And I would like to encourage all of you to take an active part in this meeting. That's all from me. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mirosław, for greeting our participants. Thank you for all the wishes for my name day. Yes, indeed, the patron saint Barbara is closely associated with miners and the mining work. But she is a saint, of course, and she always looked favorably on those who worked hard and who did a lot of good work. When I asked my parents why they chose this first name for me, they said, we had no idea this saint is associated with hard work, so forgive us. All right, let's start our meeting. In the first part of our meeting, I am expected to present some conclusions from national research. I would also like to tell you that Agnieszka Zwolińska from the Warsaw University is also attending this meeting, and she will tell us more about EWCs. She will give a lot of background to our discussions. And if we neglect a topic or two, she will bring us right to the center of that topic. We have talked about many of those issues already during our meeting in Warsaw, and I welcome your input and your comments about any upcoming events, about anything that is currently happening in your countries as far as EWCs are concerned. All right, let me move on to the general conclusions from our research. Our respondents gave us a lot of feedback. We tried to assess to what extent the COVID pandemic affected the operation and functioning of EWCs. And many of our respondents told us, especially the respondents from Poland, in the research I carried out, and they told us that they still perceive the effects of the COVID pandemic, but other phenomena now move to the foreground and become more important. Our workers in the metal industry pointed to the access to energy and the prices of energy as the boiling issues right now. And the prices, especially given the geopolitical situation and the Russians' invasion on Ukraine, so this effect will continue, and this will affect our energy security. And this has been highlighted by our respondents. And they said it affects the metal industry to a large extent. The other thing that our respondents told us about is the policies, circular economy politics and policies, digitalization policies, greener economy policies. They all affect the metal industry too. In other words, all the measures that the governments are taking to reduce the impact on the environment also affect the metal industry. Also, the digitalization policies affect the metal industry, albeit to a lesser extent than the green policies. So the green policies and the digitalization processes, they affect on each other, action, reaction. Our respondents told us that there were some issues that they perceived to a great extent. For example, the strategic autonomy that the European community is trying to regain or introduce. It particularly shows in the pharmaceutical industry. The pandemic showed us that some ingredients of medicines play a very important role. And when they are available in countries outside of the EU, then the role is even greater. Also, some of the supply chains have been interrupted, for example, in steel metal industry, and it affected the automotive industry to a large extent. But when we looked at the research, most of the respondents in the metal industry said the EWCs coped well during the pandemic, but this is mostly because we focused on the metal industry, and the metal industry during the COVID pandemic did not experience heavy redundancies or restructuring processes in that time. The accommodation industry, the catering industry, the service industry, they were different in that respect. They experienced the effects of the pandemic much more. So our respondents said that the EWCs coped well with the pandemic, and right now they believe these processes play a less important role. And right now, what's more important is the energy prices, the green environment policies, and digitalization. So these positive, the positive feedback is mostly due to the fact that we focused on the metal industry rather than a service industry, which was more severely hit by COVID. So this is the first conclusion from our research. Secondly, and I also mentioned that during our training session in Warsaw, there was a factor that differentiated the responses from different countries. It seems that the respondents exhibit a different level of satisfaction with the work of EWCs. And the satisfaction level depends mostly on the role assigned to the EWCs by the respondents. These bodies are mostly designed for consultation and information. They're expected to provide information at the right time, even before the decision is made by the central management. And many respondents stated the EWCs failed to fulfill that role. And this could be particularly seen in the answers of the Polish respondents during the Polish focus group discussions. So it seems they expect EWCs to evolve into a body that is not merely tasked with information and consultation, but it should become a body that is able to negotiate with the central management. And it boils down to the question, what role we assign to the EWCs, what role we wanted to play, for example, during the collective bargaining process. Also, what ultimate goal should EWCs play? Right now, some legislative changes are going to take place if the decision is made by the European Commission, but they are not going to affect the fundamental principle underlying the EWCs. They will still be the body for information and consultation. Let me also add that the negotiation, collective bargaining, are outside of the competences of the EWCs. But what their primary role is consultation and information. So, this is the right to information and consultation at the national level should be provided, and it affects the way it shapes the expectations of EWCs. Some respondents stated that even though there is Article 28 in the trade union law, which says that people should have access to information, then the trade unions struggle with getting full, comprehensive information provided at the right time and at the right place. And this makes their expectations soar. If the local management does not provide adequate and timely information, then the expectations of the central management are higher. And also, we looked at the differentiation in responses from different countries. In Poland and Portugal, we noted that not all the expectations of EWCs were fulfilled, and the respondents were more skeptical, and they were wondering whether they are able to function properly given the current legislative framework. And these respondents believed that the EWCs should become stronger. But in the reports from Spain and Slovakia, the voices were more differentiated. The level of satisfaction was not that pronounced. And the respondents were quite happy with the functioning of the EWCs. And fewer people stated that the role of EWCs needs to be strengthened. So these are the key conclusions from our research, because we have already done some work, the national research and the comparative report. And these are the conclusions from that. And during the training session in Warsaw, we talked about very similar topics. And we could see that the assessment of the functioning of EWCs differs depending on whether we speak to the trade unions or we speak to the representatives of employer organizations. And we could see that clearly in the responses of our social partners from Europe to the proposals of the European Commission about the amendments to the EWC directive. So some areas need further work, in the directive, and the laws need to be improved. For example, in the sections relating to access to due process, to court, definition of a national issue versus international issue, and the regulations pertaining to confidentiality, because sometimes the issue of confidentiality prevents the management to pass on certain information to the employee representatives. And even if information is passed on, then these trade union members cannot pass them on to further members. But the European Commission is responsive to those proposals, but the representatives of employers say that the legislative framework is quite effective right now. What we need is some soft measures such as manuals, guidelines, etc. And we could perceive that quite clearly during the training session in Warsaw. And we could see a clear difference between the opinions of trade unions and the opinions of employers' representatives. So there were quite distinct disparities. I would like to draw your attention to a very important aspect. The goal of this meeting is to work on developing a tool to assess the effectiveness of EWCs. I have prepared a presentation and I will also send it out to you. And it contains some proposals, and it is a catalog of questions that should help us assess whether the EWC is functioning properly or not. The Institute of Public Affairs would like to develop such a tool for assessing the effectiveness of EWCs, but we need your comments, we need your feedback for that. We need your ideas and what you think about such a tool. What is your expectation of that tool? How should that tool work? What should be the legal framework for that area of information and consultation at the level higher than national level? And so can this tool be a simple auto audit tool for the members of EWCs to check whether their job is done properly or not? Well, I cannot see you well right now. Well, let's not forget this is an online meeting. And it would be a good idea now to tell us about your experience with EWCs. Have there been any new changes, new developments since our meeting in Warsaw? Is there anything you would like to share with us? And what are your expectations of that tool for assessing the operation of EWCs? Let me now start an interactive part, and I welcome your comments and your feedback about how we can assess an effectiveness of an European Works Council. Could you please raise your hand if you want to speak? So anyone willing to speak, please raise a hand, and then it will be easy for me to spot who is interested in taking the floor.
Obviously, you are welcome to just post a note using our chat window. Maybe there's something you'd like to add, referring to the information I have just shared with you. You want to add something specific to your country.
Nie widzę w tej chwili tutaj żadnej.
Nobody seems to be raising their hand or expressing the willingness to add anything on the topic at this moment.
Jeżeli to jest, jeżeli w tej chwili nie ma tutaj chętnych do.
If there is nobody willing to speak right now, so let me just move on to my presentation and give you some information about the expected amendments to the Directive on European Works Councils.
Więc jeżeli nie ma w tej chwili, nie mieli Państwo w tej chwili tutaj woli jakby skomentowania.
Okay, so since you have no comments on the current situation regarding EWCs in your countries, let me now move on to the discussion of some changes that lay ahead. Let me start with what we have already said in Warsaw. So in 2021 and in 2023, the European Parliament issued two resolutions. The information is here on the screen. The first one from 2021 was not a piece of legislation. It was a general resolution on workplace democracy. It was proposed by an MP, Gabriela Bischoff, and this first resolution of 2021, the authors touch upon a number of matters. First of all, it placed information and consultation as well as the reinforcement of these mechanisms within this broader framework of the European Green Deal, the green transition, and the digital transition. So, to sum up, the authors emphasized that in order to achieve the just transition without leaving anyone behind, we need to strengthen the information and consultation mechanisms. On top of that, the resolution touched upon a number of other topics, EWCs, stronger employee representation, including blur representation, so board level representation. And it also discussed the need to introduce a common European model of workers' participation. Let me just remind you that the implementation of some specific solutions in this field would require unanimity. This does not pertain to the mechanisms regarding information and consultation that can be amended by simple majority. So here lays the difference as regards the legislative path that would govern information and consultation and participation. With regard to the second matter, so participation, there are no EU rules, mostly as a result of this requirement to adopt a unanimous law. The second resolution was adopted in 2023 and was proposed by Denis Radke. This second resolution concerns directly amendments to the EWC directive. It was a legislative resolution and it contained an annex outlining the desired changes, amendments proposed by the author of the resolution. Let me move on to the next slide. So here you can find direct references to both resolutions. Let me draw your attention to one fact. The European Parliament as such cannot propose any new law. This kind of legislative resolution is of political value. Nevertheless, at the very onset of the term of this commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in her political statement, suggested that all the legislative resolutions of the European Parliament adopted by a vast majority of votes will be treated by the Commission really seriously, and the Commission will take up actions in order to achieve the objectives outlined by these resolutions. So, in other words, it was a political declaration that even though the treaty does not oblige the Commission to take such actions, whenever such resolutions are adopted on the basis of Article 225 of the treaty, the Commission will take up such steps. And in this case, she made good on her words, and the Commission started relevant works. As I have mentioned before, and in the slide you see a summary of the information on the proposals contained in the annex to the resolution by Mr. Radke. So we have a broader concept of transnational issues, a new revised definition of consultations, including the transfer of certain provisions that are now included in the recital into the main body of the directive. Why? The research has shown that when member states implement directives, and this is not only about this specific directive, they tend to glance over the content of the recitals and they implement the main body of the directive. As a result, there is insufficient reference to this soft part of the directive, including in the recitals. Now, let us move on to the next issue, which is confidentiality. The authors proposed certain provisions concerning the introductory part of this process of establishing EWCs as well as sanctions. As you can see, this proposal introduces very strong sanctions, including financial penalties. This is the part you can see in red, and it is one of the most divisive issues. Nevertheless, this resolution has been adopted by a vast majority of votes, and some of the Polish MPs suggested that because of these provisions on sanctions, they would vote against it, and they did vote against it. I have already mentioned the response of the European Commission. Let me just say that the European Economic and Social Committee has dealt with this matter a number of times already. So previously, even though its statements didn't refer to the EWCs directly, the committee has spoken on the digital transition, on the green transition, and the general need to strengthen the right to information and consultation in order to ensure that these processes take place as they should, so without causing too much social damage. And here in the slide, you have the position of the committee outlined in greater detail. Okay, let me now move on to the first stage of consultation. It seems to me that I have discussed it in detail, and I can see many of the participants of our meeting in here. So the first stage of consultation was the stage involving 11 recognized social partners listed here in this slide. And what are the conclusions? Well, the opinions presented by the partners are quite diverse. The ETAC was quite happy to see the Commission move on this matter. Importantly, the European Trade Union Confederation praised the Commission for making use of the solutions suggested by the legislative resolution of the European Parliament. By contrast, employers' organizations pointed out to some other issues. They said that EWCs generally operate correctly. There is no need to strengthen or amend legal framework that governs the existence and operation. And here, let me add one more thing. a third of EWCs, so what we refer to as EWCs, are information and consultation bodies that were established even before the directive came into force. As a result, they are not governed by the directive. They are the so-called pre-directive EWCs. Especially from the point of view of Central Europe, it is crucial that we do away with these bodies. Why? Very often, we've been observing the following situation. Multinationals, where such bodies have been put in place, extend the geographic scope of the operation. They enter new states, especially in Eastern and Central Europe, but the composition of the EWC remains intact. And since they are not governed by the directive, there is no legal basis to enforce the representation that will actually reflect this modified range of operations, geographical range of operations of the multinational. So this is one of the bones of contention between the trade unions and business Europe. So the winding up of these EWCs that are not governed by the directive. On the other hand, employers point out to the fact that the existence of these bodies provides much needed flexibility, especially to the companies that established them before the directive came into force. So, as you know very well, the Commission had to ask the partners, the social partners, whether they are willing to negotiate. If they express their willingness to negotiate, the Commission would suspend its works. But you need this declaration of both parties. As you can imagine, from what I have already said, there was no joint motion to take up negotiations, neither in the first nor in the second phase of negotiations. And here I will digress because it doesn't pertain to EWCs directly. Let me give you a general comment on negotiations at the European level. Unfortunately, the last process of negotiations concerning remote work and the right to be offline ended in failure. Last week, ETAC and Business Europe notified the Commission that the negotiations failed, that the partners decided to cease the process without reaching a consensus. So there will be no consensus in this matter, on this matter, and no, obviously, request to adopt a directive. It is a strong and very worrying signal as regards the condition of the European social dialogue. For many years, for more than a decade, European partners have failed to negotiate any agreement that would produce a directive. And now, given the current period, when we had employers consent to negotiate remote work conditions and the right to be online, well, the parties failed to reach a consensus. The parties failed to reach an agreement. So, as regards EWCs, the fact that there was no common conclusion, it's quite obvious. And let me just say that in the second round of consultations, the organizations of employers presented their views by sector, and there was no will to modify the position as regards the first round of negotiations. So Business Europe emphasized the importance of soft actions such as guidelines and good practices. Well, I'm not a fortune teller, so I can't foresee the future steps taken by the Commission. Actually, the Commission has very little time to start the legislative process. It is the consequence of the schedule and the fact that next year we will have elections to the European Parliament. Probably we should expect some proposals of amendments to the EWC directive very soon. But if it doesn't take place, I believe if it doesn't take place in December, the Commission quite likely will decide not to go ahead with this process. The fact that the first and the second round of negotiations with social partners have taken place doesn't mean necessarily that the legislative process will be launched and that the Commission will present legislative proposals and will send them to the European Parliament. So this issue remains open. Thus, that is all from myself as regards the process of modifications. In a moment, I will obviously send the presentation to all of you. But as regards my knowledge of the matter, this is all that I can share with you at this very moment. The legislative process that is in place. So I would strongly encourage you to share your views, to share your opinions concerning the outcomes of the research phase of our project and your expectations as to how the tool assessing the functioning of EWCs should be constructed. Okay, I can see the first hand raised, the representative of employers, our colleague from Spain. First of all, good morning from Spain, good morning from Sevilla. Let me also greet my colleague Alvaro. We met in Warsaw, and obviously it's much nicer to meet in person than online. I will be brief. I can see that I am the only one representing employers in this group. At least it seems to me to be so. Nobody else represents employers' organizations here. I might be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that this is the case. So I represent an organization of employers from Andalusia that makes part of Business Europe. So we are Business Europe members. And let me emphasize what I mentioned during our meeting in Warsaw, actually. Let me say once again what my opinion is on the amendments to the directives. Well, I would like to focus on some shortcomings of this directive. And obviously, since I am an employer, I will represent the perspective of employers. We are not in favor of the modifications that are likely to be proposed. I believe that we should reach a consensus rather than modify the directive. Maybe we should create some guidebooks, collections of good practices. I agree with this stance. We have launched the process, we have launched the dialogue between European confederations, between social partners. The round of consultations took place in October. When this invitation was formally sent by Business Europe. I believe the addressee was Nicholas Schmidt. I might be wrong. And the second addressee, I believe, yes, I didn't get the names right. Yes, please correct me. Anyways, so we need to work on social dialogue. There's no doubt about that. Because the amendments need to point out to the importance of social dialogue. This is the key matter. And I believe that both trade unions and employers should continue striving to achieve this goal. This is not the right moment to draw any definitive conclusions. It's hard to say what's the stage of the social dialogue we are at right now. If the European Parliament and the Commission continue to wait for us to reach a consensus on this legislative reform, well, it will be quite hard. I have already mentioned in Warsaw the fact that these legislative changes will influence the labor market. If such changes are based on a consensus between both parties, they will be positive. They will be positive because they will enjoy vast support. They will improve industrial relations. They will improve the condition of the economy and our competitiveness. So what matters is social agreement, social dialogue. Let me move on to Spain. In Spain, all legislation was rooted in social consensus. So they were agreed within social dialogue between social partners. And these laws were seen as the most positive. So let me stress the importance of social dialogue to improve our situation, political context, and to go ahead. This shouldn't be construed as meant to protect workers only. We should also think about improving the competitiveness of our businesses, improving our economy. From our perspective, the consensus is necessary to defend the rights of both parties. I see this as highly beneficial, and this is how both parties will be able to identify as the actors behind the change. So we shouldn't necessarily try to modify the law, introduce new restrictions, or even impose less flexibility. I think that I've not contributed anything new, but this is what the situation is like, and this is the current context we need to operate within.
Thank you very much. Please don't worry. You're not the only representative of employers here. We have some employers from Serbia too. Serbia is a candidate country for the European Union. And the thing that the representative of employers spoke first does not mean we do not value the voices of trade unions. We spoke in Warsaw about that. We exchanged our views on the importance of amendments to the EWC directive. It should be purposeful. We shouldn't do it just for the sake of amending it. However, the trade unions and the employers perceive the situation in a different way. Trade unions believe that any amendments to the that the EWC meetings are just very limited. There is no consultation, just some information is provided. So the EWC plays a symbolic role. It's just like a forum for exchange of information. It's just like a meeting at the company headquarters, and it's not the point. The question about whether the changes or amendments are necessary or not come from the different way in which we perceive the role of EWCs. I'll be finishing shortly because I can see some volunteers from Portugal willing to speak. So we are mostly focused on the metal industry. And in this industry, trade union representatives are quite strong, but still they have a lot of reservations about the functioning of EWCs. So we can imagine what is happening in other sectors, other industries, for example, in services sector, where the representation of trade unions is weaker. Portugal, over to you now.
Bom dia a todos. Peço desculpa, eu não estou muito bem. Estou aqui.
Good morning.
Estou bastante doente.
Sorry if you cannot hear me clearly. I am feeling a bit rough today, but I wanted to take part in this meeting, so forgive me. We always disagree with the employers about the functioning of EWCs. But in general, EWCs do not work properly. We lack information. When there is a project or when there are some changes to the company structure, or when they are planning layoffs simply, or they plan to move to another part, simply the workers do not get that information on time. So there is actually no consultation, and we cannot have any influence on the decision makers in the company. That's why we agree with the proposed amendments to the directive. We support these two resolutions. I was looking for the correct term, sorry. So we support these two resolutions, and we believe they could work well, and they could have some very good effect on how the EWCs operate. The companies obviously voted against imposing penalties or making the penalties stricter, harsher. But of course, it would be far better if we found a better solution, but they do not always work, and the penalty always work. So perhaps we could reinforce the right for consultation and information. And that's all from me, actually. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much for your input. All the best to you, because clearly you had some difficulty speaking. You are in much pain in your neck. So we are keeping our fingers crossed so that you recover quickly. I would like to draw your attention to two fundamental issues, and then I will hand over to Agnieszka Zwolińska from the Warsaw University to provide some comment. So there are two fundamental issues I would like to highlight. The first one is we can ask ourselves a question. In the economic situation, in the social sphere, is it business as usual in our economies and in our social situation? Or is the situation extraordinary, abnormal? And is the number of different proposals and policies related to digitalization, CO2 emission reduction, the greener environment, circular economy, are there too many such changes in policies? And the intensity of those processes is quite high. And should we apply other mechanisms, or should we move them to a higher level so that they simply work better? So this is my first question. Is the new situation forcing us to adopt a different approach to other areas? And the second fundamental issue I would like to highlight, and it's an open issue, is the issue of sanctions and penalties, because we are seeing more and more that the sanctions in national laws and in the EU laws, for example, regarding the consumer protection, is so we can see that the protection of rights, including collective rights, such as information and consultation, is getting weaker. It's not an accident. It's not by chance that when Denis Radke proposed stricter penalties, harsher penalties, he said, look at the sanctions that the companies are facing when they breach data protection laws, or when they reach other norms in the GDPR. And if the laws on EWCs are broken, what are the sanctions? There is a great disparity between the harshness of sanctions for data protection and the harshness for sanctions for violating employees' right to consultation and information. So what is the general role of sanctions? We should ask ourselves. And this gives us a wider perspective. And when Denis Radke proposed harsher sanctions, we should read more into it. I believe we should give some thought to the general weakening of sanctions in protecting general and collective rights. I'm not saying that it should be as strict as the sanctions for violating data protection rights, but I can see a clear disproportion. There is a lack of balance. All right, I'm asking you this question, but let me hand over to Agnieszka Zwolińska for now. Hello, good morning. We haven't met yet, so let me introduce myself first. Like Basia said, I work at the Warsaw University, and I work closely with the courts and with judgments on labor laws. So, of course, sanctions is a very, very vital subject, and I could speak a lot about that, but I would not want to focus on that because I can see there are many more interesting issues for you. Looking generally at what has been said, the right to information and consultation at a transnational level is an issue I would like to look at as a lawyer from the point of view of legislation. And when we look at the documents, and then we can ask ourselves, is the revision necessary of the EWC directive or not? And what does the social dialogue at a transnational level depend on? So let me give you a broader context to that, because Barbara asked me to do that. Social dialogue depends on the actual environment and on the limitations that restrict it. And it depends also on the motivation of people that are involved in a dialogue. What do people want to achieve through that dialogue, and what role they assign to that dialogue? Somebody said here that the social dialogue and the right to information and consultation is also about asking ourselves about the role of EWCs in the future, in 5 or in 10 years. Is the right to information and consultation going to look like it is looking now? Should the company just merely provide information to the EWC, or should we change the paradigm, or should the EWC work efficiently and identify problems at the national level and become the source of information for the employers about the issues, boiling issues at the company? Because it seems to me, and it's my personal opinion, that it would be an effective way for them to go forward. I would like to share with you a new perspective on the role of information and consultation. So the employee representatives can also be a source of information about the problems that the local management and central management haven't noticed. I am speaking from my experience on the market when new technologies are being introduced, and we need to integrate the man with the machine, and we're going to have more and more of that. There is a question how to do it most efficiently, because the people have the information first. But is there a way of listening to people, collect the information from workers, and draw some conclusions? So we should look at the communication process as a two-way process, top to bottom and bottom to top. Right now, employers have access to information. We don't. We want to have effective tools to get to the information, even if employers are not willing to share information. And this is one way of saying this. But we need to change the employers' perception of the information and consultation process. They should not see it as a nuisance, as a way of decreasing competitiveness of a company. They should see it as using the potential of employees and using it to the best of the company. And for now, the employers do not look at it in this way. Is there a chance for them to start feeling that way? There was a question, a very interesting question that Barbara asked today. What are the times that we live in? Are we on the verge of creating a new social model right now? And what is the role of information and consultation at the national and transnational level then? When I look at the EWC, and we are mostly focusing on EWCs today and on ways of for them to operate effectively. How can this effectiveness be enhanced? And looking from my perspective, I now focus on the legal framework, the current legal framework. What possibilities are afforded by that? Should the legal framework be changed and modified? But are there any possibilities away from the legal framework? Things that can be done in the current system? For example, strengthen the collaboration between EWC members. Strengthen the collaboration at the lowest level among the employees so that the flow of information does happen. So there are some possibilities, there are some options that can be used here, and I I I am interested to hear many views, and there are many people who want to be employee representatives, and they need time for that, and they want to get engaged, and they want to be active, but they need time for that. So there is a question of the framework in which they can do this, and they will be able to do this. So I am proposing that some things can be done in the existing framework, in the existing system, and we can introduce some changes in the day-to-day operation of EWCs. But I'm proposing this, but I'm myself amazed by what I'm proposing because I am a lawyer and I'm mostly concerned about laws and about protection of workers' rights. I have some doubts about the protection because the changes are happening right now so quickly at the company level. They do not translate into the fast pace of processes at the court. And I am looking for possibilities, and I am encouraging you to look for some options too. The state offers some legislative process. It's not effective right now. The changes would take a lot of time. So we need to come up with ways of what can we do with what we have. I can see that some people are willing to speak right now, so I do not want to take up too much of your time because I am vitally interested in what you want to say. I would like to hand over to a gentleman from Spain now. Mr. Alvaro Garrido, over to you. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. I don't speak Spanish, unfortunately, just some English and some French. So over to you, Mr. Alvaro. Good morning, everyone. I am very happy to see all of you again, even though it's just an online meeting. Anyway, all the meetings in this team are very interesting. I have some thoughts about the problems we are seeing in the European Union. These are problems with the directives, but also problems that affect the directives. The first thing is that all the legislative work is very slow. In June 2024, elections are coming, and it seems that not much is going to happen with the directive by that time. And when the elections are held and when the commission changes, this will also affect the directive. Maybe we will hit the consultation phase. Maybe there will be some support for the negotiation process. The composition of the parliament will definitely affect the way this directive will look like in the future. So the legislative work is really slow. And the changes happening in the industry are fast, rapid. And they are much faster than the operation of EWCs. My colleague mentioned that information that is expected to reach the EWCs comes late, even after the decision has already been made. And we at the national level have to fight again, fight to get information. Sorry for using combat language, but we just have to fight to get information. This is what it looks like from our perspective. Our respondents stated that EWCs worked and functioned during the pandemic, but in my opinion, given the rapid changes in the industry, all of the work is obsolete and very slow. Barbara mentioned that there are some bodies that were formed before even the EWC directive was enacted. These are obsolete also. My colleague mentioned that what the directive says does not always correspond to what the employees and employers want. And we struggle with our competitiveness. It's difficult to remain competitive in the industry if other markets, for example, the BRICS countries, are very strong when you look at the global arena of major players. So it all works really slowly. The European Union mechanisms is slow, and it affects negatively the industry, and it affects both the employers and the employees. The elections are coming next year, and usually the attendance of EU citizens is not huge. That means the citizens of the European Union are not optimistic about changes in the legislation. Sometimes the legislation of the EU is seen as a threat that adversely affects the operation of workers and employees at the country level. So it very often happens that EU citizens have a bad opinion about legislation, and that's why the attendance at the elections is quite poor. And many EU citizens are dissatisfied. And the representatives of trade unions are very often disappointed with how the EU works, operates, functions. And when it comes to improvement of how the EWCs operate, it must be a natural consequence of improved employee participation. Of course, the right to information and consultation needs to be reinforced. If there are members of the employees, if the members of the workforce are present in the governing bodies of the company, it will also help a lot. My colleague said that the changes to the legislation are not so necessary, but I believe for some of the employees and for some of the employers, it is a necessity because they want the fate of employees to be improved. That's our opinion. That's all from us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Agnieszka, for your comments. Thank you, Alvaro from Spain, for your input. Are there any other participants willing to speak? And perhaps we could hear a voice from representatives of countries that are not yet members of the EU. We have Serbia and we have Turkey here. Perhaps you would like to add something about the right to consultation and information. Do you have any comments? Do you have any feedback? Of course, we are not in a classroom. I'm not a teacher. I'm not calling you out in the middle to the blackboard to speak, but we would be interested in hearing what you have to say. Some interesting topics have been touched upon. Very well. I can see a representative from Serbia willing to take the floor now. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for joining you a little bit late, but I had some technical issues with Zoom. Nevertheless, good morning. Yes, we already know the data from Warsaw and other meetings. As regards the formal and legal issues, let me say the following. We in Serbia cannot establish European Works Councils. However, when it comes to the right to consultation and information, we do have certain formal legal definitions of the two. So the employers must inform workers, especially about everything that affects their social and material standing. Other issues are not covered by the obligation to inform. Nevertheless, the real difficulty is to enforce the right in practice. There is yet another path, and it's the path of collective agreements. In the metal sector, we have collective agreements covering roughly 70% of this sector. So they contain regulations regarding information and consultation. As a result, we can say that the situation is not always very positive. We know that the business world is quite crazy, especially after the pandemic. 2021 was the period when everybody was on standby, but the companies wanted to generate profits, and obviously it affected the situation of workers. What happened? So the businesses told workers that safety is their own problem, and this is the world we live in. I wouldn't like to prolong, so this is all from myself at this point. Thank you very much for this opinion from Serbia. Well, so what's the situation as of today? In my view, Dr. Zwolinska said a very important thing. Information and consultation is not a one-way street, so from top to the bottom. Employees' representatives are an excellent source of information on what is happening on the shop floor, what are the processes that need improvement. So this feedback for the management, especially given this dynamic context of technological change, can be really precious. So the exact, precise recognition of how the processes that are being implemented work in practice, what kind of effect they produce would be very important. So it is one of the aspects, right? This bi-directional nature of information. Then Alvaro said something important about global competition. So there are areas in the world, the vast majority of our globe, where there are no guarantees concerning the right to information and consultation. We are well aware of the fact that In some multinationals, there were some agreements with trade unions or trade union associations, on the basis of which some bodies were established in order to consult and inform employees at the global level. Nevertheless, looking at the general situation at ILO, one could hardly expect that legal regulations would be put in place by ILO on the exchange of information and consultation globally. Why is my outlook so negative? Well, we are dealing with high levels of conflict between employees and employees at the ILO. Just recently, a few days ago, yet another attempt was made at resolving rather a discussion on the right to strike. This discussion within ILO was fueled by this fundamental divergence between the International Organization of Employers and the representatives of the International Trade Union Confederation as regards Convention 89 and the right to strike that makes part of the convention. So recently, the parties decided to make a request to the International Court of Justice to resolve this matter. So, as we have heard from our representative of employees organization from Andalusia, it would be best to resolve everything by consultations. But the fact that the right to strike was submitted to the International Court of Justice to resolve shows that this process of debate, which is more than a decade long, has not produced any conclusions. So, in the end, the parties decided to submit this matter for the resolution by a court. There is no doubt, however, that the question regarding the global right to information and consultation is crucial. And then there is the question about the EU attitudes. To what extent the European Union is associated with certain actions aimed at improving the situation of workers, the actions that are also regarded as destructive to the labor market. Obviously, there are differences between member states. Let me go back to the crisis of 2008 and the consequences of the financial crash. Well, we can say that it's an old song, given what we have lived through later, so COVID and Russian aggression in Ukraine. But referring back to this financial crash and the resultant crisis, we had the macroeconomic recommendations issued by the European Commission to member states. And the perspective of the European South, Greece, Portugal, and the trade unions from those states is completely different, because these states were asked to decentralize negotiations, introduce more flexibility as regards minimum wages, and introduce more flexibility in terms of remuneration in general. So the impact was perceived by the trade unions as very negative. On the other hand, within the same period, Poland received recommendations completely consistent with what trade unions asked for. So, reducing the number of fixed-term agreements that were so high, that the number of which was so high that even the European Union said it really requires immediate action. Also, Poland was asked to reduce the number of so-called civil law contracts that causes this duality, the divergence between two groups of workers in the Polish market, one of them being completely exempted from the rules introduced by the labor code. So I do agree that for many citizens of the European Union, this aspect of unification of our market is totally invisible. The question is, can we make our citizens put trust in this ongoing process of tightening our relations? We are now facing key questions such as for instance, doing away with the rule of unanimity in favor of majority voting. So these are the changes that are quite far-reaching. We are living in a dynamic environment. I am personally not convinced that the European Commission will make it in time to submit the amendments to the directive, given the schedule and the elections that are ahead. And finally, Article 4 of the directive on the adequate minimum wage. So the article that expresses the political intent will to increase the number of workers covered by collective agreements. It is clear that the collective agreements contain detailed information on the right to be informed and consulted at the national level, obviously. Okay, I believe that we have prepared the ground for a discussion. If you agree, I would suggest that we have our break right now, a little bit earlier. And following our break, I will show you a presentation with some tools that could help us to assess the effectiveness of European Works Council. And here, let me ask the leader, so the host of our meeting, whether we can start our break a little bit earlier or some other comments. What do you think? What's your opinion on this matter? Okay, I do need some feedback from you. Yes, I wouldn't like to rule as a dictator. Thank you, Alvaro, that you have confirmed that this is the right choice. So this is the Spanish willingness to act. So we have jointly made this decision. We were supposed to have, let me check, half an hour break. So let us now take a 30-minute break and let us meet once again at 12 o'clock at noon, yes, as in an old Western. So have a strong coffee and be ready to speak after the break. Thank you very much and see you back at noon.
Koleżanki, koledzy, myślę, że możemy zaczynać.
Dear colleagues, I think we may start again.
Widzę się z Wami zdalnie ze swojego mieszkania, które
I'm joining you
koło Starego Rynku.
right now from Warsaw, from my home, and since I live close to the old town in Warsaw, I can hear the bells right now just telling me it's noon. Okay, so let us resume our meeting. As I have said before the break, I wanted to make some suggestions regarding the tools that is aimed at assessing the effectiveness of EWCs. However, let me re-emphasize one more thing. As per our project, this tool should be elaborated by all of you. I ask you then to treat these questions, these proposals as a starting point. Obviously, I'm going to send you the presentation, and the Institute for Public Affairs, which is responsible for the final elaboration of this tool, will wait for your comments. We may set a deadline, and I would like to ask you for some feedback, how to develop this tool so that it could truly assess the effectiveness of EWCs. It must be our joint work. We must develop this product, this project outcome together. Okay, so now let me share my screen.
Dobra. Więc tak, ja oczywiście dalej tutaj mówię w języku polskim dla tłumaczy, no ale mają Państwo tą prezentację w języku angielskim i taką prezentację w języku angielskim Państwu roześlemy, więc będzie można się...
So you can hear me speaking Polish, but I will share the presentation in English. Let me repeat, I would like to ask you to provide us with your feedback regarding the outline of the tool aimed at assessing the effectiveness of EWCs. Let me start with the following. Well, in research, various authors attempted a classification of EWCs depending on their effectiveness. So there are 4 categories that have emerged and that have been referenced by a number of authors. It's an old classification made about 2015, so already a long time ago. So symbolic EWCs. Then the second group was the category of service-oriented EWCs, project-oriented EWCs, and finally the 4th group, participation-oriented EWCs. So the 4th category would be our target outcome. The weakest EWCs, referred to as symbolic EWCs, are characterized by no common understanding of the ways of work within this body. There's only one meeting with central management per year. So there are no working groups that would meet and no other meetings except for the single meeting that the directive requires to be held. The EWCs receives information but doesn't run any discussions with the central management. And importantly, there's hardly any communication in between the different members of EWC in between the meetings. So this is the rough description of this weakest form of EWCs. Let me digress. One of the amendments proposed to the directive, obviously I'm referring to the resolution by Denis Radke, and the elements of the resolution that the Commission took into account in its works requires raising this minimal threshold of meetings from 1 to 2. Obviously, we know that this is the minimum and that the agreement establishing a specific EWC may provide for more meetings. However, in the proposal, the idea is to improve the quality of operation by raising the minimum number of meetings from 1 to 2. So this is the weakest form of EWCs, a symbolic EWC. The second category are the service-oriented EWCs. So there is information provided by central management, and then it is forwarded to national members without any follow-up. The information flows to the central management about the developments and problems in specific countries, but there are no conclusions, no requests, no demands. And the communication within EWC is quite rare in between these annual meetings. So the EWC works a little bit better, but the functioning is quite unsatisfactory as regards the most desirable outcome. And the next category is project-oriented EWC. So in this case, there are certain issues that are taken up more proactively by the EWCs. So issues are dealt with in working groups, and then these working groups present certain conclusions. The results are discussed with management, and one important thing, there is actual communication occurring between the EWC members in between the meetings. So there is some coherence, yes, as regards the actions taken up by EWC. And the fourth category, so the participation-oriented EWCs that work well. So there's detailed information across all processes at the multinational level. EWCs issues joint opinions on all planned projects and changes within the multinational. EWC discusses strategic decisions with the management, and finally, EWCs develop certain alternatives to the plans presented by the management board. So the actual consultations take place, and we have emphasized that a number of times. We need consultations to take place before the final decision is made. So something that has been discussed by the EWC may have an actual impact on the final decision being implemented by the board. Obviously, no one will answer the question about how many EWCs may be classified into these four categories. It's just a scientific approach to assessing the manner of functioning of this body. So we need not be attached to this terminology or this perspective. In particular, as I have said, this methodology was developed a long time ago, and it is the only one that has been elaborated. So many of us rely on this division. However, these categories are not specific enough for us to answer the question which EWC could be classified into which category. So we know we have the 4 classes from the weakest one, that is the symbolic class, where central management boards say that, well, the key aspects of EWC operation is this annual meeting that serves as an opportunity to travel and dine well. And finally, we have the strongest EWCs that are participation oriented and produce tangible outcomes. What we need to bear in mind is the following. There is one more problem. Should we consider the EWCs that go beyond the competences laid down in the directive as the most effective ones? So we would find that the most effective EWCs are the ones that operate in multinational corporations where transnational company agreements or TCAs have been signed. TCAs are agreements with the central management. We know that TCAs currently do not deal with collective bargaining issues such as remuneration or work time or the amount of redundancy fees during collective layoffs. However, we do have TCAs on training, equal treatment, financial participation of workers. We have TCAs on occupational health and safety, and many TCAs that are quite general in nature and resemble documents on corporate social responsibility, so codes of good practices and so on. And now let me pose a question. What can be said about TCAs in the context of assessing the effectiveness of EWCs? Let us remember one thing. A European Works Council is not necessarily composed of representatives appointed by trade unions. So the question is the following. To what extent EWCs should enter into a collective bargaining process? Well, we have no reference to any legal framework. TCAs are gentlemen agreements concluded out of even optional legal frameworks. And as far as the European trade union movement is concerned, the idea of taking up the actions within the realm of collective bargaining at the European level, well, stirs mixed emotions. So now the position is the following. European sectoral federations are authorized to sign TCAs, and EWCs may encourage such negotiations, but the agreements themselves are signed by European confederations or local trade unions. So EWCs may inspire negotiations, may verify to what extent TCAs are being implemented, but they are negotiating these agreements themselves. Okay, I believe that this mechanical attitude to assessing EWCs can be rejected. So by mechanical approach, I would understand the approach based on adopting TCAs on the basis of which we would conclude that where TCA was adopted, the EWC is the most effective. It seems to me that it would be a mechanical simplification going too far. Let me add one more thing. The purely linguistic understanding of the membership in the trade union, so rather EWC. So I understand the EWC members as people who are employee representatives that are either appointed or elected and who meet with the central management board. They receive information from the central management or they engage in consultation with the central management. So it is clear that the ultimate effectiveness of EWCs obviously will depend on the interaction between employees and management. So the central management may fail to abide by the rules set out in the agreement, in the directive, or the local rules on EWCs, and they may fail to conduct the information process. They may also conduct this process too late. The management may abuse the laws on confidentiality. It's something obvious. But what's important to me is to emphasize that as regards a series of questions to the employees' representatives, either trade union members or not, we want to make you aware of one thing. EWC members need to strive to improve the effectiveness of the work regardless of the attitude of the board. Okay, so what kind of questions can we pose?
What questions we can ask? And when the answer to a particular question is no, is negative, it will suggest that the quality of work of an EWC can be improved. Of course, a single negative answer to a catalog of questions does not mean this EWC, their quality of work is low. No, I don't mean that. Let's look at the majority of the general response to all the questions. Okay, does the central management meet with the EWC more often than once a year? There is a thesis we can propose that if there are more meetings, then it indicates that the quality of work of an EWC is better. Next question. Does the EWC meet with central... Are there working groups within EWC dedicated to specific areas? If there is no working group assigned, then it means the intensity of work of a particular EWC is low. Of course, the effectiveness of work of a working group can be different, of course. But if there is not a single working group, then it means that the EWC has not even attempted to focus on an issue. Next question. Is there always a preparatory meeting of employee representatives before the meeting with central management? It means, do the employees meet among themselves, among the trade union or other representatives of the workers, meet and discuss the items on the agenda with the central meeting, with the central management, sorry. Let me remind you that the communication between the members, for example, provision of interpretation services, should be provided by the central management. But there are many instances in which such preparatory meetings do not take place. And the next question: is there always a meeting after the meeting with the central management to summarize the meeting held with the central management. This means, is there a separate meeting among the employee representatives to simply discuss what happened during the meeting with the central management? If a negative answer is given, that signifies a poorer quality of an EWC work. And if the answer is always positive, that means they work much better. I presented this on individual slides, but it doesn't mean that there will be negative or positive answers prevailing in any of the areas we're addressing. I would not like to propose a matrix here, calculating how many negative answers, how many positive answers. It should just give us an overall view of the quality of work of EWC. Okay. Next question. Do you see topics related to greening of the economy, reduction of carbon emissions, digitalization, psychosocial risks, and remote working in the works of an EWC? I believe these processes are very important. They affect the way in which work is performed. And if an EWC is not at all concerned with these issues, it doesn't signify it takes its job seriously. Next question. I need your feedback. We can eliminate this question or we can leave it as it is. I am not sure myself whether we should keep it or skip it. Are there employee representatives from non-EU countries among the employee representatives? And I mean here members from candidate countries to the EU or countries that do not wish to become members of the EU. So this question only makes sense if a corporation has some production or has some locations in a non-EU country. And it does not necessarily have to always be the case. I believe that it requires an agreement because it's not written in the directive. But these people should be able to take part in the work of an EWC, but perhaps they do not necessarily need to have a vote. But the opinions of trade unions differ. Some trade unions believe that if there is a production facility in Tunisia, it's just an example, then it would be a good idea to have a colleague from Tunisia on the EWC to ensure a flow of information between this Tunisian facility and the rest of the company. But some trade union members say it is not an EU member state. It is difficult to say whether this is a true trade union. Maybe it is just a trade union that is strongly affiliated with the employer. And so these trade union members simply are not sure whether they should be invited to be on the EWC as an observer. But on many occasions, the central management opposes the inclusion of non-EU member states employees in the EWCs because they simply do not want to cover the cost of travel. And the directive, again, let me reiterate, it does not require non-EU member state employees to be included in the composition of an EWC. Next question. Do worker representatives exchange information on an ongoing basis on issues of relevance to their locations? Let me emphasize these are questions which are by definition not within the scope of powers of an EWC because they are simply not transnational. But the question is aimed to establishing whether there is a flow of information, whether there is any talk about the production processes, about remunerations. The next question is very sensitive, and it's about whether employee representatives honestly and openly answer the questions of other employees, even if they relate to sensitive issues such as remuneration. In our room, we have representatives of employers, but it is not a secret that it is often happen even among the trade unions that they simply do not share information about remunerations between corporations, or they do not share information about severance pays when there is a layoff or a restructuring process. And the members of EWCs from Central Europe often struggle with that they have no access to such information. We often hear that the members from the old EU member states treat their collective bargaining as sensitive information. And I am not talking about employers who want to treat the documents as sensitive and confidential. I'm talking about the employee representatives who also do not wish to reveal the information. Also, when there is a restructuring process going on at the company, are you able to get information from your colleagues on the EWC about the negotiations or restructuring details at the national level? And the last question is one which is very difficult to carry out operationally, but do EWC members act as one team that know each other, communicate with each other, etc.? And if all the questions have been answered yes, that means the quality of work is good. And if all of them have been answered with no, that does not necessarily mean it's a problem, but it means that the quality of work of that EWC is lower. And the last set of questions, would you agree with the following statement? In this part of my presentation, we still talk about employee representatives. We are aware that central management may try to play one location off against another, but this automatically gives us a red light. This means there is a situation in which we have to demonstrate solidarity within a company. Of course, the situation varies from one company to another, but there is this textbook example, and we call it a beauty contest, and new car models appear in the production facility, and the central management allocates where these new models would be manufactured, and they expect a certain softness on the part of negotiators in a given production facility, and in reward for that they will grant them the model. Okay, and then we have the last question. Would you agree with the following sentence? All trade unions are treated similarly by central management, and is there a flow of documents among the members of the EWC? And it's clear that if there is a no answer to any of these questions, it does not mean the quality of work of that EWC is low, but every no requires some thought, perhaps an attempt to diagnose a problem, or maybe some process in which underlying problem could be resolved, because maybe there is an issue with internal communication, and a mechanism could be created among the employee representatives on the EWC to improve the work, which means can the employees by themselves make the work more efficient when working as an EWC, regardless of what the central management does in relation to that EWC. So I have a proposal which I would like to make now. These questions, a catalog of questions, is just a starting point for our discussion. It is supposed to be a tool to assess the effectiveness of EWC. And I now would like to hear your opinions, of course. Are there any comments off the top of your head? It would be elusive to conclude that an effectiveness of EWC only depends on communication and collaboration between the employee representatives themselves only. Effectiveness of work of an EWC to a large extent depends on what information is forwarded to them, at which point of time the information is forwarded, and if the communication process with the central management does take place. So we need to check whether the EWC receives information, and then we can be tempted to make such checklists. This is just an example. This is an example of information that is necessary for an EWC to function. And if a member of EWC needs to consider whether their EWC functions properly, then they could try to assess whether the information listed here is received by the EWC and provided by the central management. And I split the information into groups. For example, information about employment figures, for example, the total headcount, the changes, and different categories. What is the basis for employment? Is there flexible form of employment available? Are there fixed-term contracts available? Are there temporary staff employed at a given company? It may play a significant role in some cases, in others not so much, because the situations across companies varies. And also information about employee planning, the company's policy on gender equality. The second category of information is financial information, turnover, profit and loss account, any trends, company policy regarding financial issues, financial plans. The next group of questions is about the financial structure of the company, explanation of a balance sheet, change in share value, question of competitiveness, planned production changes, and launch of any new services, launch of new production methods. Then we have a group of questions, a group of information we would call social information. And in the best case scenario, the next groups of information would be about any changes in technology, mergers and acquisitions, trainings. And this is all information that an EWC should be getting from the central management. So if there is a checklist in front of a member of an EWC, they would be able to check whether they get the information or not, whether they receive comprehensive information from the central management. Naturally, information only is not sufficient. We listed the categories of information that should be received, but the quality plays an important role too. Is the information detailed enough? Is the information split by location or by product groups or categories? Because sometimes if information is too general, it's not useful to the EWC at all. Or is information provided in a dynamic way? Are you able to respond to information, you've been given? Are there any changes versus last year, versus previous period, to be able to capture any trends? Is information provided sufficiently ahead of the meeting for members of EWC to be able to read through the material, which sometimes is considerable, and not only read, but also prepare questions, prepare some comments? A meeting is only effective and productive if all sides come prepared. It's very important for members of an EWC to be able to prepare before a meeting, because by nature, members of an EWC representing different locations and facilities must often ask for some clarification, or must ask some questions, consult with other people. They are not able by themselves to instantly prepare for the meeting without any prior research. If they know the information much ahead of the meeting, they can get information from others, prepare, understand what the figures mean, then the meeting is more effective. We have another checklist.
And how to define it? Well, this is the checklist that concerns expected restructuring measures. So if we have some questions regarding the restructuring plan, we may decide whether the information we have received allowed us to foresee the restructuring processes that took place. So this is the checklist for preliminary assessment of a restructuring plan. Representative of workers, through ongoing communication that must take place, need to be able to agree on some specific steps. It might happen that this final checklist is irrelevant in practice when it comes to a specific EWC. This checklist concerns the conclusions from a restructuring process that has already taken place. We should be able to compare the effectiveness of EWCs, but there are some EWCs that have just been established, and on the other hand, we have EWCs that have been existing for years, have been through many restructuring processes, and could draw their own conclusion on the basis of their experiences. So it is clear it won't be every single EWC that would be able to draw conclusions from past restructuring processes and assess its own effectiveness in this respect. Perfect. Let us move on. Okay, so what we need to take into account is not only the opinion of workers. If we wanted to truly decide whether EWCs are effective, we would also need to ask some questions to the members of the management. So the first question would be, could you indicate what, in your opinion, is the added value resulting from central management meeting with the EWC? Do you see it only as fulfilling a legal obligation on the corporation? Because if a representative of central management theoretically responds, well, I see no value added, I simply comply with the law, this would show us that the EWC has not found a modus operandi in which both parties would be able to find some added value. And the subsequent questions are the questions I would like your feedback to. Obviously, you don't have to present it right now, but I hope that you will send us some comments via mail. We still have some time to develop this tool. So, for instance, I have the following question. Do EWC meetings with central management take place in different locations so as to take advantage of the EW meeting to learn about the specificity of work in various locations? The subsequent questions concerns the demands that were raised by EWC members, because obviously in 99% of cases EWCs are established on the basis of a request of employees. So the question is, why the management board member decided not to fulfill the requests that were appended to the EWC agreement. So it was decided that the minimum requirements set out in the directive would be met, but nothing else. Obviously, the next question concerns the existence of working groups on any specific issues or challenges, and whether the central management inspired the establishment. The final question seems quite important to me. So are the employers, let's say local employees, informed about the outcomes of EWC meetings with central management? Because it's not only that the central management should inform the employees about the work, but the same information, especially the information on the outcomes, should be passed on to local management. Obviously, I have heard a number of times from many members of EWCs, and I'm referring here to my colleagues from Poland, but I believe it's not a situation that is specific to my country. So whenever they go back from a meeting of EWC, a local employer in a specific company ask them a question. They invite them to a coffee to learn about the, well, I don't want to say gossip, but what do you think the plans of the management, central management are? You are well informed. Let's talk. So, well, it's a good thing. It's good to have some social relationship, right? Personal relationship. But if the representative of employees refuses to follow up with such a meeting, I would say that the quality of work of the EWC would be lower. And finally, each of the no answers does not result automatically in assessing the functioning of the EWC as poor. However, in every single case, we should attempt a diagnosis and in any situation at least reflect upon it. Okay, so this is the proposal on the part of the Institute of Public Affairs on the construction of a tool that would aim at assessing the effectiveness of operation of European Works Council. So now let me invite you to present your comments. However, bear in mind one thing.
I'm sorry, something is right now wrong with the translation because I hear, I think, Serbian on my channel. Więc pozwolicie, że zlikwiduję
Okay, so let me now close the presentation.
Czy ktoś z obcokrajowców mógłby dać mi sygnał, że
And please
polskie tłumaczenie
let me know that your translation is okay. Alvaro, yes, is everything fine with translation? Yes? Okay, great. Perfect.
Poproszę o przesłanie dystrybucję tej prezentacji.
Okay, so now I will ask our organizers to send this presentation to all of you, and let me now remind you that we are waiting for your comments via mail. And now I see that our colleague from Portugal already has a comment he would like to share with us. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have only one doubt because I'm not certain about one thing. I didn't see all of the information as regards the assessment and the quantitative assessment. Do we have any scale? In some situations, the answer isn't clear completely. So it could be yes, but in some cases, the answer is no. So in the case of answers to some questions, they may vary. So maybe we could have a scale from 1 to 5, yes? And maybe we could also add something in between, because in some questions, some meetings something works, and during some meetings something doesn't. So the meetings may vary in terms of their dynamic. So do we have a scale? Maybe not from 1 to 5, maybe from 1 to 9. Yes, that would be a method to providing a better answer, because in some situations it is difficult to give a definitive answer, either positive or negative. The situation is somewhere in the middle. So I believe it would be useful to introduce a solution that would give us a chance to provide a better assessment on a scale. Let me repeat, not necessarily from 1 to 5, then we would get at the 3 in the middle, 4 that's closer to 5, and 2 that's closer to no. Yes, so yes, 1 to 5 will be a solution, but maybe we can have a different scale, different solution. It's an idea. I don't know what your opinion is. I believe that in terms of the parameters of assessment, I would not be able to give a clear-cut answer, yes or no. It responds to most of these questions, so I would be also very grateful for this tool once it's in its final shape. Okay, well, when I'm thinking about developing this tool to assess the effectiveness, there was one difficulty I came across. So in some situations, an European Works Council works badly because the central management violates the law, right? So they don't get information, there is no consultation. So the rules that the parties agreed upon are not being complied with. In such a case, the European Works Council doesn't work well, it's clear. But it is rather obvious. So I also wanted to point out to the matters that are within the realm of competence of EWS itself. Do you communicate with each other? Do you use a variety of tools that we have at our disposal? Well, we are holding an online meeting, and I believe that right now in this post-pandemic world, everybody is familiar with online meeting, and they do not generate such costs at their travel costs and so on. I was discussing this matter with my colleagues who sit on European Works Councils, and one thing continued to be raised. And I will not be particularly creative in here. There are problems with communication that are the consequence of the language barrier. And it is a barrier regardless of the existence of DeepL and other tools that allow us to translate entire texts. It is not sufficient to resolve the difficulties regarding face-to-face communication. So such communication without interpreters continues to be limited. And my trade union colleagues ask me what are my expectations of them. I wish I had better relationship with others, but I don't speak any language that we would have in common that we could use. And I know that I'm not saying anything surprising, but still in 2023, this answer that we lack a common language, not metaphorically, but directly, we speak different languages. This is the answer I get quite often. Obviously, we may create a scale 1 to 3, we may think about rephrasing some of these questions so that if somebody answers yes, for instance, no consultation has taken place, the information was not provided despite group layoffs that took place in at least 2 locations. So they had this multinational dimension. Immediately, the EWC is classified as weaker. But it seems to me it is impossible to develop a tool that would objectively, comprehensively assess the operation and functioning of EWCs. Well, the purpose of this tool is to give us a chance to reflect, to provide us with material to think about our work. We will not create a competition between EWCs. We will not hand out any gold medals to the most effective EWCs. Okay, has anybody, does anybody have any other comments? If so, please go ahead and speak up. Jose, yes, you raised your hand. Go ahead, Jose. Jose, yes, go ahead. I can see that you've raised your hand, Jose. Go ahead. Jose Manuel Casado, go ahead. Over to you, Jose. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me apologize for the fact that I joined you only now. I had a logistic issue and I arrived late. I would like to add a couple of comments on this tool. The entire topic is fairly complex. It's hard to answer yes or no to some questions clearly. However, as regards the specific questions, let me start with a general question. For instance, does an EWC have access to linguistic support, to office support? We need it to work. And then we can speak about communication. If we have at our disposal at all some translation support and so on. So if we are able to provide our members with information in all languages, if we have this support, do we have access to information channels? And are we able to follow up with information provided to all members? I believe that the topic is rather complex. There are many details. Do we have the backup? Do we have the support? Is our system efficient? Do we know what we want to communicate? Do we know what kind of channels can be used? Do we have the linguistic support, the technological support? There are many matters that come into play. So I believe that we could ask many questions that would allow us to arrive at the final conclusion. But let me say once again, the issue is rather complex. Yes, I do agree that the issue is very complex, but within our project, we do have this task. So we need to develop this tool to examine the effectiveness of European Works Council. So I was trying the best I could as a representative of the partner tasked with developing this project to approach it the best I can. Well, nobody needs to convince me that it is very complicated. And there are many different stories about EWCs. Well, there are also some that shouldn't be raised in the presence of employers' organizations. There are stories including the stories of EWCs because Danish colleagues don't want an EWC to be established. So, in the case of this specific European Works Council, there is a really huge scandal within this multinational. So, well, even workers often can't collaborate together, especially in export-oriented sectors. There is an overt competition between different factories located in different countries. Well, the automotive industry is a great example of how specific factories can fight between themselves to be the ones to produce a new model being launched in the market. So I am well aware of these difficulties. Nevertheless, I had to attempt this task, right? So this is just the first outline, the first ideas for discussion. We need to complete this task within a specific time frame. So, if you want to add some comments, please send them by the 15th of January. Can we all agree on this deadline for your email comments? And let me agree that if I don't receive anything by the 15th of January, it means that you have no comment whatsoever. I'm going to send you this presentation right away, but all your comments are appreciated. Is the 15th of January okay with you? Let me know if it's fine. How do you understand it? Because by the end of January, our institute needs to complete the work on a document elaborating this tool. So I need to get your comment within a specific date. So by the 15th of January, I would like to know what you think about it. Okay, Agnieszka Zwolińska, yes, let me ask you to add some comments. Oh, no, sorry. Before Agnieszka, I also see that we have other people. René, you have raised your hand. So over to you, René.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the floor. I would like to congratulate you, Barbara, on preparing and developing this tool. I think you have put so much effort into it, and you split that into different topics and questions. I'm sure you have taken a lot of time to do that. And also, in order to comment on this proposal, I need to read it carefully, but I believe this is all very interesting, mostly because of this division into different topics. But I have a comment off the top of my head. There is one thing missing from this catalog of questions. For us to be able to self-diagnose the work of an EWC, we should be able to incorporate an idea that Agnieszka Zwolińska mentioned. I mean here the information from bottom to top, the information flow from bottom to top. So if the information flow has taken place, then the activity has been successful. It could help us identify if the work has been productive or not. It would simply make the diagnosis easier for us. It seems to me that there should be another section with questions, the thing that Agnieszka Zwolińska suggested at the beginning of our session. Also, there should be a clarification on how to assess the different questions. And for example, it's not always easy to give a yes or no answer. Sometimes we do not have information on time. And that means the activity hasn't been adequate. If we want to group the answers somehow, it would be easier to tell ourselves, okay, if this answer is that, then the activity has been successful or among the EWC or not. And also, if we assign categories to some answers, it would be easier to evaluate the work quality of an EWC. Also, an interesting proposal was made by a colleague from Portugal, that there are some situations which are very, very particular. And we could have some room for stating that a situation is quite complex, and this could also shed some light on the operation of an EWC. So these elements, if added to the overall evaluation, would make it fuller, perhaps, and more comprehensive. But again, I would like to congratulate you on your work, and I would like to thank you simply for the effort you have put into that catalog of questions. And I will make sure to send my feedback before January the 15th. Once I get the document, I can read through it, and then I'll be ready with my feedback by January 15th. Thank you very much. Definitely, we could add that element to our catalog of questions. Are the members of an EWC a source of information for the employer? So is the communication flow going both ways? I have just sent the presentations from today to you on over chat. And this tool presentation is in 2 language versions. I displayed the English version part, but for our Polish partner, I've also drafted a Polish version. Don't worry about the form of your comments or feedback. Just give me something off the top of your heads. Just write something, what you think about this tool. Something that will take into account all the different intricacies and interdependencies. Is there anyone else who would like to comment now about the tool? Are there any hands raised? If no hands are raised, then maybe I will ask Agnieszka to comment. Thank you very much for this meeting. for inviting me, for having me here, and for being able to watch you in the process of developing the tool. Barbara's presentation has also inspired me and has given me some thoughts. Let me summarize. It is very ambitious to try to assess the communication and consultation process. When all the answers will be met with a positive answer, then it's going to be really well, and the goal will be long term. And any feedback is valuable because it's more than zero. Even if we get negative answers, then we get to diagnose the situation, and it begs for questions what can be done to improve the situation. I think it's a great tool to check and assess the practice. I am a lawyer, and I actually miss that because we are concerned with the regulations, but then we don't know how the regulation functions in real life. So this is my first conclusion, but I also have another conclusion, and I have jotted it down. So let me have a look at my notebook. I think it's very important that we discuss also the resources, the translations, the possibility to meet, but also access to meetings and to experts, sorry. It's not only the interpreters that can support EWCs. I know that sometimes it's difficult to assess the quality of information received and then to be able to understand it and comment on it. So I believe EWC members should be able to access some experts to help them do that. I am interested in mediation and in bargaining and negotiations. So let me comment that if consultation is considered as a tool, then you should also look at the equality in access to information. So everybody should have access to the same set of information, should have the same understanding of the information, and then they should reach a conclusion on what the problem is about, and then they can start look for a solution to that problem. And then the parties can reach a compromise or find a consensus. So this requires a mindset, a shift of the mindset. And we sit at a table together and we look for a solution together. It will be beneficial going forward for our collaboration in the future. It's easier said than done, but sometimes working together on something collaboratively is far more valuable than the ready-made solution. Working on something together or attempting to solve a solution is much better than just providing a solution to the other party that they can accept or will not accept, and then they have a feeling that they lost, and this is not beneficial. So I believe parties should strive to find a solution, and if they agree to that solution, they are certain that all the important things that play an important role for them have not been ignored or neglected. So fully participating, sharing information, getting to know the other party's interests and needs is crucial. Sometimes parties entering a room just have some agendas and negotiation goals, and it shouldn't be the case, because collaboration, working together, is more important. The last comment that was made here was very important. When there is a negative answer to a question, what do we do then? And I believe it would be a good idea to get information about best practices from these EWCs that have tackled a similar issue and have coped with it successfully. So what I mean here, that information and experiences should be shared. I don't mean to say it will work in every single situation and in every single location, because EWCs are different. But if something is wrong, then we should ask ourselves the question, where should I start? In which direction I should go? And when you look at the long-term goals, these factors play an important role. I would like to wrap up, and I would like to comment on everything that has been said here. There is talk about the obligation for information and consultation. And when we say obligation, we mean the social dialogue and positive practices about social dialogue. And when we speak about an obligation on the part of the employer, then there is this approach, okay, I fulfill an obligation, but I do not necessarily do what I need to do. And this is a different approach. This is something we need to overcome if we want to build an effective dialogue. However, without this obligation, then there's no social dialogue to speak of in places where it didn't exist. At the end, I would like to speak about the penalties that are being proposed. So there will be some fines that the companies will have to pay if they do not fulfill the consultation obligation, and then if the central management does not consult with employees. I have some positive and negative comments about those penalties. Of course, it will act as a deterrent. It will be good for prevention. Based on my experience with violations of data protection rules, I can see that the legislator and the employers addressed a lot of issues. The employers wanted to avoid some penalties, for example, heavy fines that will destroy their business. And this caused some activities which we wouldn't even be speaking about in Poland if it wasn't for the European Union, the new legislation, and the penalties. So companies simply try to minimize the risk or avoid the risk of penalties. And this is a good and positive effect of those sanctions. But there was another comment made, and it speaks to me quite clearly. When I think about sanctions versus social issues, versus negotiations to resolve some long-term problems, and if I meet the other party after some sanctions have been imposed, then if they had to pay a heavy fine, and if they now meet employees who caused that indirectly, then they will be less reluctant to open to a social dialogue. So that means penalties are not an ideal solution. But there's also one more thing which is quite effective from my perspective as a court practitioner. Then the penalties should so there should be an obligation for the companies to provide information through, and this can be secured through injunctions. So no penalties, but unless the company complies with these obligations, then, for example, some decision is imposed on it, which stops some of it. And it will be faster, it will be more efficient. So we will be able to use the injunctions. unless you comply with the obligation to inform employees, then you cannot make that decision for your company. And it will be very effective, but the state must be able to build a structure to impose such sanctions, either in the form of fines or injunctions. And I'm telling you about this because I want to draw your attention that sanctions alone will not guarantee the right to information and consultation at the transnational level. These are communicating vessels. We need to look at this issue from many different angles. We should try to repair things that problems that have been identified already. So the tool that you're developing right now here, it's a very good idea to capture issues and start addressing them in a rational way and not only concentrate on buzzwords. So great idea, and great thanks to Barbara for preparing the presentation. And also thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Thank you for your participation in this meeting. It's always a great idea to invite somebody from the outside to join a group of people who have already had a chance to discuss some matters during our last meeting in Warsaw. Well, okay, blocking a decision. This is something that sparked our discussion on EWCs. Looking back at the projects that eventually failed and did not get adopted in the form of directives, well, one of such drafts provided for a solution where decisions that were not approved were not being implemented. So they were suspended until the consultation process took place. Okay, well, the matters got even more complex afterwards, as after 2004, when the EU was extended, the new EU members, or some of them, had a very low social dialogue culture and a very low unification rate. So this capacity to organize is not something we may forget about when discussing EWCs. Okay, right. Well, it seems to me that we have exhausted our agenda for today. And as usually, let me now ask the leader of the project, maybe to sum up what we have said so far and conclude. Mirek, can I ask you to conclude? Yes. Once again, let me thank Barbara for her immense work. I also would like to thank Agnieszka Zwolińska for her input and for the information for the new developments concerning EWCs. Well, the new proposals are not perfect, and we as members of EWCs are very well aware of the problems regarding the functioning of these bodies. Maybe the budget was too low, maybe the information provided by the employer was not enough, or was actually disseminated in the media. So we also need to talk about this issue, especially as regards the automotive industry. There is this tension that somebody was given the opportunity to produce a new model, somebody else was not. And we do know that the future of a specific factory depends on it. For a huge multinational, a single factory is just one factory. But for the thousands of people who work there, it's all their life. So it's the question of life and death for many. It is the case. For instance, at some factory near Barcelona, Nissan factory is being closed, and it's the kind of information that doesn't always come up during our EWC meetings. So I hope that this amended directive is actually submitted to the Parliament in this term or in the next term. We are pressing exerting pressure on our EMPs. There's going to be electoral campaign. We are going to invite our EMPs to our own meetings, and we as trade union organizations are saying clearly what needs to be reformed, what needs to be amended and improved. Because we do want to improve the functioning of our organizations. And it's not easy because the Europe and the trade unions in Europe are facing challenges regarding technological transformation, the dual transition, and are part of the very functioning of EWCs. Our plants, steelworks or automotive factories will be impacted by this transition. So we need to ensure that this transition is just and that no jobs are lost. And this is also the task for the European Works Councils. So our project will go on. As Barbara has said, by the 15th of June, all of us should comment upon the proposal. Let us send our comments for this draft. And those of us who are EWC members should also present their opinion and tell us how could we improve this tool, how could it be rendered even better, and how can we also improve the draft that has been submitted to the Commission. So to conclude, let me just go back to what our colleague from Spain has said. Following our debate in Warsaw, we also had a question regarding the service, the questionnaires, and who participated in questionnaires. It's also important. We wanted to create a network, yes, and maybe our colleague from Spain could give us an update. I filled that in, I sent it out, but I'm not sure about others. Okay, Manuel, I can see that Manuel has raised his hand and wanted to add something. Okay, so we still have two people. Manuel, you can go ahead, but I believe that Jose, yes, you also wanted to answer Mirek's question. Do you know anything about these questionnaires? Can you say something about it? Yes, we have received your question. Thank you very much for filling it in, but we have not received other information. We are going to send our questionnaire out soon, as soon as possible, and thank you very much for your feedback. We have received your message. Yes. So this is what we decided that we could do it within our project. Thank you very much. And I can see that Manuel, representing employers, is raising his hand. Over to you, Manuel. Thank you. I wanted to take this opportunity, since we are closing our meeting for today, to share with you with a reflection that may be useful to all of us. Maybe it's something we haven't mentioned yet, or we haven't mentioned before in Warsaw. What I mean is the day-to-day work of European Works Council. It's something that we could maybe include in our conclusions. All of our work to this point focused on effective functioning of EWCs. So we are assessing them from the point of view of failure to fulfill the obligations in international companies. So failure to provide timely information or failure to fulfill other duties. It seems that in some cases the information is provided late, once the decision has already been made. So we often focus on this perspective. And we are analyzing these cases of incompliance in international corporations. The consequence is the following. Perhaps indeed we don't need to amend the directive. We need to think about tools to improve the functioning of EWCs. But I wanted to add something to our discussion, to make a contribution that would maybe represent a different point of view. I believe there is yet another fundamental element that would help us to optimize the operation of European Works Councils. Mutual trust. In order to create a situation of mutual trust, we need to meet certain requirements. First of all, confidentiality, mutual understanding, and really commitment to get results. These factors need to be in place, and both parties need to have this attitude to provide the right context for the establishment of mutual dialogue. And this is how we'll be able to ensure that European Works Councils work better. So I believe that we could reflect on whether all of these factors are in place so that we could facilitate mutual collaboration. Let me repeat: mutual trust, commitment, mutual understanding of each other's interests as well. And obviously, mutual trust is the most important pillar. I believe that these are the things that we need to take into account when assessing European Works Councils. And I wanted to add this point of view because this is something that I believe was missing in what we have said. And I saw that we are focusing on the failure to comply with the law on the part of international corporations. So we cannot forget about this perspective and about the elements that are very foundational for the good functioning of European Works Council. So this is something that I wanted to close with a little bit of a different perspective so that you have also a different view that could help us to reflect on the tool that we are to develop. Thank you very much.
Bardzo dziękuję za ten głos.
Thank you for this contribution. I believe that all of us agree that trust is crucial.
Ja nie chcę się skupiać na jakby kwestiach negatywnych.
I don't want to focus on the negative aspects. Showing good practices, highlighting good elements in the operation of European Works Councils is very important. But the task that I have is different. Because our task is to try to develop a tool, an internal tool for European Works Council members. So we are not going to organize a Europe-wide competition for the best EWC, but a tool that could allow or help EWC members to reflect on the effectiveness of the body. So I do not have these huge ambitions, right? I only want to inspire some reflection, especially among workers' representatives. Dear colleagues, thank you for this meeting. We are closing a half an hour ahead of time, but we have discussed many things. We know what kind of tasks we have ahead of us. Let me repeat that the Institute for Public Affairs is well aware of the fact that we are to develop this tool, but I count on your comments, on your remarks. You can send them by email. You can just comment upon the PowerPoint that I have sent you. Thank you very much. Let me just remind you that we have evaluation questionnaires. You have links in the chat box. Agnieszka, it doesn't apply to you because you were a guest, but it is about our project partners. So please remember to fill in the questionnaire as it is necessary for the settlement, financial settlement of our project. We need to submit this documentation. Okay, right. So can we call it a day? Have we said everything? Yes? Yes, yes. So, okay. So let me just close the day by thanking our interpreters for the work. It is thanks to them that we can exchange our experiences. And since it's already December, so we are in the Christmas mood, let me already today give you my best wishes. Merry Christmas. May they be joyful and, most importantly, healthy, so that we spend this Christmas with our families, so that they are memorable. Now we have wonderful weather in Poland. It's snowing, so the atmosphere is already Christmas-like. So all the best to you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I also wish you Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad in all of the languages that I can think of. So let's stay healthy and merry until the next meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you to our interpreters. Thank you for the meeting today. Bye.